Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of No Strings Attached. Today, I have a pleasure of welcoming Kristaps Petrovs in my virtual studio, and it's a great honor because I really enjoy talking to people um, that are, not necessarily tennis coaches. They're coming from a different background, and they bring so much knowledge, and I feel often overwhelmed. So, and I like that feeling because I like learning. So, Kristaps, thanks a lot for joining. Thanks a lot for finding time to be here.
Thanks for having me, Bogdan. It's a pleasure.
Listen, I'm honest when I say I'm excited to talking to somebody that is not a tennis coach, because even though you get to learn a lot of things from your fellow professionals, like talking to physiotherapists and fitness coaches, like brings so much different perspective, because I have so little knowledge. I do have some, obviously, like a little bit, but so less knowledge compared to my everyday life. When I host fitness professionals, I just get like so excited. And obviously, a fitness professional of your caliber is gets me like even more excited. So I wanna start by talking about who Kristaps is, in terms of how did you get into being a fitness coach? I always
Yeah,
find that fascinating.
that's a great story. I have to give big credit to my former educators, my parents, for um, I was just fortunate to be around sports, most of my life since I can remember. And, my father being, you know, um, a high level soccer player and basketball player at the same time. Originally I'm hailing from Latvia, where I was born and raised, and did my bachelor's degree. So, and then actually my both parents are PE teachers, and my mom's a track. She was a track athlete and a coach, and my father, playing basketball. So obviously he coached basketball as well to this day, and so they kind of put me in. Naturally, I was just in an environment where I really enjoyed activities, any kind of activity and sports. And then remembering those days when I grew up, we just didn't have the technology. All we did is we just played outside, from morning
Yeah.
to evening. And so whenever we had a chance, so yeah, I think it started in school, the love for activities first of all, and just movement. And so going to university, like I said, I have to give big credit to my educators in at the Latvian Academy of Sports Education, where I graduated as a basketball coach and PE teacher. So majoring in education. So I think that was a big, an amazing foundation that kind of laid, for the future positions that I've been holding and in jobs that I've had. So, and then moving to Canada in 2009, I there was not much basketball where I moved to. I moved to Calgary, Alberta,
Mhm.
right? So, and obviously it's a predominantly winter sports driven city, because of the weather conditions and stuff. So I just moved into. I wanted to stay obviously in sports, so a natural kind of involvement and staying in sports was to move into fitness, and that's where kind of my journey started. I mean, even before I liked going to the gym and lifting weights and doing different things. So I already had like a good base from the university days. But moving to Canada, I had to get my credentials. Luckily, my education, my bachelor's degree was acknowledged here in Canada. So I got my credentials, so I'm able to work as a PT, strength and conditioning coach, and then yeah, so it all started at the YMCA in Calgary. So you know that's kind of like the place where I started exposing myself and work more as a strength coach, with different groups and as a volunteer as well. And so yeah, that's where it all started. And along the way, up until this point, it's been 15 years since I've been in Canada. And so I took all kinds of opportunities along the way, whether it was volleyball or cross country skiing, to work as a strength coach. And I just, volunteered and took smaller, bigger jobs. So it didn't really matter whether it was, wrestling or anything else. Whenever there was an opportunity, I wanted to expose myself and then, immerse myself in that. And you never know what's going to come from it. So nothing is guaranteed. All you can do is you can just, put your foot forward and do your best. So, yeah.
Awesome. So you've been involved with the National Training Center for quite a few years now, like five,
Mhm.
6 years. Is it 6 years?
Yeah. So, and then I didn't fully answer your question how I got involved in tennis. So, my journey started in Alberta in 2014. So
Okay.
they were the Tennis Canada were looking for a part-time fitness coach in Alberta, um, and at that time, the regional center was led by Alan Mackin, who you are familiar with, and yeah, so I applied for the position. I applied actually for a position in Toronto, so where one of our colleagues, Andre Labelle, and Andre Perron saw the resume, and they I think actually hired someone in Toronto. So, but then I give me a chance to get an interview in Alberta with Alan, and so and I started there on part-time basis, and we were doing regroupings then in Alberta and Edmonton on monthly basis. So that's where I really started, and I have to thank Alan for giving me the opportunity, and for Andre Perron for guiding me and mentoring me in the tennis field. So
Yeah. So, but now you've been in Toronto for how many years now? 6 years, is it?
I've been in Toronto since 2019. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we actually met first on my first day at Tennis
Yes.
Canada, and that was your final day, I
Yes.
think.
Because I remember
Yeah,
when I left, you came. So that's
yeah.
5 years exactly.
So
Okay. So
yeah. So we met in the
okay.
gym. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then yeah, and then I was running the junior fitness for a few years alongside Clement Goulier, and who really well, and you worked with him, and so yeah, and then in 2021 I joined the Granite Club. So, but I'm still consulting with Tennis Canada, and I'm
That's
involved with the coach education, the TPA Coach 2 and
right.
Coach 3. So that also has been an amazing experience for me. So
I want to talk about something that you brought up when you were describing how you were growing up, and many of us were facing um, the same childhood in the sense that we were kind of on our own most of the time. When we have our free time, we just do whatever we want. We go play soccer, we play basketball. Like I was the same thing. Like after I was done with my tennis with my school, I would just drop my bag and just go outside and do stuff. Right now, you don't see that. Like it's been a
mm,
problem um, of like quite a few years now. And the more we go forward, like the more we see kids overscheduled with activities. They don't do things on their own, and as a result, in my opinion, we have lack of physical development in kids. Right, their physical abilities on in general they're on the decline, even when we're working with like tennis players who are you know are scheduled like to do stuff, they're still lacking because there's this not enough of doing things on their own. So my question to you is, how do you tackle that in an organized environment, or how do you make sure that an athlete, a kid, okay, U10 kid, U12 kid develops properly because they're exposed to less physical activity as a
Hmm.
result?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I've had interesting discussions with the different tennis coaches and fitness coaches alike, and I think um, me as a fitness coach, I have the responsibility and the ability and in the opportunity to provide them with multi-sport environment. So basically, what I'm doing in my current role, I'm doing a lot of fundamental movements. So that are geared to running, jumping, throwing, catching, sliding, etc. So basically, using multi-sport approach. Um, and I'm fortunate to be in the position where I'm able to do that because we have basketball hoops, we have handball nets, we have soccer nets, we have hockey nets. So through different sports and small-sided games, I'm basically a PE teacher because a lot of the kids even nowadays that are playing, they're just focusing on playing tennis or priority.
We have some connection issues. Hopefully, Kristaps will rejoin. Let's give him a couple seconds here. Hello? Yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, something happened.
that's
Anyways,
okay.
um, basically, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to implement different sports and activities, so they get the opportunity what we had when we played outside,
Hmm.
unorganized. There's no coach there. We just played whatever we had, the opportunity with, right? So whether you played basketball or soccer or you were riding bikes or swimming and stuff like that. So
So you're
um,
pretty much simulating the street. You're simulating the playing on their own type of experience, you know?
exactly, and trying to create like not chaos, but not like it's organized, but at the same time, allowing them to have fun and play, right?
Yeah.
So and sometimes giving them the opportunity to choose a game that they want to play at some point, right? So obviously, as coaches, we want to follow a plan that we have on that particular day because we want to develop certain skills, right? Or
Mhm.
consolidate, certain skills. But if we have the opportunity to have, 30 to 60 minutes with a group, whether it's a once a week or twice a week or three times a week, to implement some sort of a free play, where they come up with their own rules of the games, right? So I try to play at least one or two games, every single day. And you can also create fun games and let's say and make different constraints and rules where they're actually working on endurance. You can make the field bigger, you can make the field smaller, where they
Mhm.
have to change direction so the heart rate goes up, right? They don't even feel that they're improving their
That's right.
aerobic capacity, but they're having fun, right? So that's been my approach. And luckily, I have the physical education background where I've been working with different kids that
Mhm.
love sports and kids that don't like sports, and you have to find a way how to make it interesting. And I think um, two things are really important when you're finishing your session. A, if a child gets into a car and a parent asks them, "Did you have fun?" And if they can say yes, and if they ask them, "Did you learn anything?" And if their answer is yes, and if you can answer, yes to those two questions, you've done a good job as a coach, right? So especially at those early ages between the age of 8 to 12, right?
Mhm.
So fun through different activities, and also learning is really important too, and developing.
Yeah, 100%. When you're talking about, like simulating all the sports and like, well, playing all the sports and really simulating that experience when you had as a kid, what can tennis coaches do to help with that? Like, is that maybe like, would you support like 10 minutes of some physical activities before the practice or during the practice? We have the reason I'm asking this is, should have started with this actually, that we have limited winter court time, right? So we have like 2 hours of training, for example. Like
Hmm.
that's our standard, high performance program across Canada, 2 hours, maybe 2 hours and a half, depending on the program,
Hmm.
maybe some three, but like on average, like we have 2 hours.
Yeah.
Um, and we treasure that court time. So we really want to maximize the tennis hours. But would you say that for some younger kids, like U10, like let's say it's a progressive high performance, or even like U12 program, would it be okay? Or like, I'm not gonna put words in your mouth. Like, what would you do with those kids on a tennis court to help with fitness? Would you incorporate some physical activities into the practice from time to time, every time? Like, what would you suggest to all the tennis coaches that are watching right
Yeah. This is something also that that we're talking and trying to expose all the coach two and coach three coaches in Canada that I have the opportunity to share my experience and knowledge with, and there are quite many of them over the last 3 years that I've been fortunate to work with. Um, and this is one of the questions that they usually ask, right? So, and then my job is to understand what is their situation at their club, and
now?
then what they actually need and what can be helpful and efficient. And my answer would be, if a child trains, between 4 to 6 days a week, I would do something every day, some sort of a physical activity, because
Hmm.
tennis in general is, physically a demanding sport. You have to be able to run fast repetitively, right? So regardless of the age, whether the court is, whether it's a red ball or orange ball, right, or green ball or regular, so they have to be able to move, you know, and have good hands, be coordinated. So definitely it starts with a warm up, right? Because so from the physiological perspective is, when somebody's raising or elevating their their body temperature by 1 degree of Celsius, the performance can increase by anywhere between 3 to 5%, which is a small amount, but it can be significant, right? It can be the difference between you getting a return or not, right? So we're talking inches sometimes, right? So I definitely preach and recommend the coaches to do a 10 to 15 minutes warm up, and then implement coordination skills, fundamental movement skills within the warm up. You can also use a racket. You don't have to, but I think that is really important, and getting kids to the point where they can start playing and serving at full speed, right? So and always keeping in mind to link the fitness to tennis. So basically telling the kids, okay, today's warm up, we're going to focus on throwing and catching, because we're going to be focusing on serving and overheads, right? So the
Hmm.
kids also understand the link between the fitness
Yeah.
and tennis, and doing it on a tennis court is, amazing. It's a great space, because you have quite a bit of space there, right? So you can do a lot of things, um, and also the spatial awareness, right? The parameters of the tennis court. Because if you do fitness in another area, sometimes when you're working on different movement patterns and over, whatever you're, really working on in terms of tennis oriented skills, sometimes they don't have the understanding of the parameters of the court. But when you do it on the court, it's, it works even better. So definitely starts with warm up. And how frequently? I would say every day.
Hmm.
If you don't have designated fitness lessons outside of that, for sure. And 10 minutes is not that long of a time. And if a child is, practicing 4 to 5 days a week, at the end of the week, it's 50 minutes. It's significant.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
kids at the younger ages learn very fast. Honestly, to give you an example, For example, a quite complex movement, shuffling and catching and passing a ball, right? When a tennis coach is feeding them tennis balls. I mean, I've seen improvement within the first 2 minutes.
Yeah, they improve fast.
You need them,
Right.
you need to give them three tries. And even if a kid cannot catch the ball or return within 3-4 minutes, they already have improved. Is it perfect? No, but they pick up things really fast. So, and it's the exposure that we really need to focus on. If you expose a child to a certain skill, he or she will improve 100%. It's a skill, so we can learn, we can teach that. So
No, you're 100% right. Like it's
Mhm.
we do some warm up games with kids, and some with older kids, like they have their own warm up routine that they have to
Mhm.
follow. With younger kids, we tend to play games, but you're 100% right. Like even like the game, like you can see how they figure things out, like how to do certain things more effectively, how to create more space if they're playing like with soccer, if they're like
Mhm.
playing like like a any kind of ball game, like just they understand things without us teaching them those things. Just and that's speaks to what you were talking about, how you organize your sessions.
Mhm.
So that's absolutely huge. I
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about, since we're still kind of on the club topic, like how can we as clubs, as tennis leaders, as tennis coaches, can improve our physical um
Sorry.
Hello. Yeah, no worries. So yeah, as we're still talking about clubs and tennis leaders and how can we all improve physical programming for our kids, um, I wanted to ask you, like, what can we do, like in terms of, let's say we have a dedicated fitness program,
Mhm.
and it's hard to find a fitness a fitness coach, like a dedicated fitness coach. Let's say we're in a situation where we don't have that. Okay. How would you help a tennis coach plan a physical program?
Yeah. I think Tennis Canada currently
Hmm.
is doing a really good job of, let's say, implementing a fitness component into Coach 2 and Coach 3. I'm
Hmm.
not sure about Coach 1. And I don't honestly know about club coaches, 1, 2, or 3. What are the fitness competencies, if there are any, within their, course content? But Coach 2 and Coach 3 currently has that. And I've been
Yeah.
developing the content, delivering the content. And we really, focus on um, um, providing the coaches with information on how to plan a session, what to do during competition, how to do a warm up, what to do with
Hmm.
coordination, and etc. So I think the TPA is a really good resource to look into for any coach, and I think most coaches in Canada are TPA members. And if they're not, I think it's really beneficial because they have also different um, video material as well there. Um, but I would say that, like I mentioned before, is doing something every day. If you have a 2-hour session, um, focus on consistency. Um, and again, if let's say, because most of the time we have to deal with parents, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes we need to educate them and sell them and make sure that my child is not spending half an hour of fitness because during a 2-hour tennis session. On the other hand, um, my selling point or persuasion kind of point and my justification that I tell tennis coaches when they're working with the kids and then the parents is that, let's say, if a child cannot run to the ball, he or she cannot return the ball. So
Yeah.
fitness at this level, let's say if we're talking about 8 to 12 and under 14, is as important as tennis, right? You can
In
develop
some
really,
cases, even more important.
for sure, because you're developing really good. You can develop really good mechanics, really good technique, forehand, backhand strokes, right? So volleys, overhead serve, and stuff like that. But if you're not strong enough for the amount of hours that you spend on the court, he or she will get injured. It's not a matter of if, it's when it's going to happen, right? So for me, obviously, I'm biased towards fitness, but it's no brainer. And 70% of the injuries from all sports across, for juniors are overuse injuries.
Yeah.
That means that their structures, their muscles and ligaments and tendons are not strong enough for the hours that they spend in the court. So I would definitely start with a warm up for sure, 10, 15 minutes, including small setted games, plyometrics, sprinting, running, jumping, landing, rotational med ball work, band work, rotational work is really important, that kinetic chain from ground up. So we're trying to mimic that. And also, if you can, implement another 1 or 2 sessions a week, even if it's half an hour outside of tennis hours, that would be beneficial. If that is not possible, I would recommend usually for parents to sign kids up for like a recreational sport, whether it's a soccer once a week, swimming, or basketball. And do those things, to do cross training, because I have seen kids, 2 different kinds of kids that have just played tennis and kids that are doing multi-sport. And let me tell the difference is massive, not just in their ability to move, but in their ability to adapt and learn new skills faster.
That's right.
Right? That is the biggest difference maker. Because if you have to spend a week just, for the athlete to learn one skill, another athlete that is, playing different sports, he's going to be able to adapt quickly within 1 or 2 sessions.
100%.
So you're just so much far ahead that, it's difficult to catch up for the other ones.
Yeah, and I can see it like over and over on the court, like where it can take literally months for a kid to learn how to properly like use the legs and to rotate, like and to rotate the hip and like to turn, or to how to use open stance. It's like, and I'm like, wow. And then I have somebody who's played soccer or gymnastics. They have good body awareness, and it's like this. It's like I don't even spend time teaching that. It's just like, oh, open stance like that. Okay, perfect. So like all those months that I would spend on the other kid to teach them like how to use that open stance or how to properly use their body, I'm spending teaching tactics or like working more technical, like so it's like saving so much time. And that's why somebody's just propelling like this, and then somebody's kind of like, and in some cases it's even like this. So
and
you're bringing up very important points.
Yeah, and then also another thing. So let's say a regular warm up. If you can do another sport, even if it's 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week, on the weekends, whenever you can. And another thing is maintaining consistency with fitness. So, for example, at my current position at the Granite Club, even during the days when kids have tournaments, I want them to still come to fitness, and they all do. A, because it's fun, and B, we're staying consistent, and they see the value in it. 100%. Because we don't have any injuries, that would sideline players and where they're not able to practice or play. So they're not. No one is actually at this point in my last 3 years a kid that has to take significant time off, right? So there have been some instances where a kid has a calf strain or something like that, and he's not able to run for a week or 2 or maybe a week, or participate fully in the sessions, but they're still attending and they're still coming. And so, yeah, even on match days, before and after, I will adapt the fitness load, but they still come because it also serves as a good warm-up, and or it can serve as a good cool down after their match.
That's right.
So, and they're happy to attend. And then I think that has been massive. The consistency is the biggest thing at this stage.
100%. I totally agree. Let's talk numbers though. Let's get a little bit more specific, because what is, like, let's say we're talking about your 8 to 12, and I know numbers will vary for that age, so maybe you can elaborate a little bit. But what is the good amount of time that a kid needs to spend doing physical, like fitness, like physical activity outside of tennis, so that they develop properly? They're not overtraining. They're not like potentially like risking getting burnout.
Yeah, a very good question. So between the 8 to 12, so LTAD recommendations through Tennis Canada, right, is to spend about, the same amount of hours, equal to their age, plus minus 2, within organized activities. So like a 12-year-old, maximum 14 hours of organized activity, whether that's, an extra sport that they do, or just tennis and fitness combined. So that would be my recommendation. But in order for anyone to improve, I would recommend at least twice a week. That would be my minimum that would be my minimum recommendation. Whether that's half an hour or an hour, that's a different question, because even half an hour is something. And you can actually do quite good work, whether it's a group, whether it's a private, you can do, a really good quality work. Because in my work, I also work with someone that comes, 3 days a week for 30 minutes on private basis. And, it takes some time to get into that habit, and then make it more efficient and effective, but you can definitely do it. If someone's really dedicated and really wants it, so definitely you can do that. And there's some kids that accumulate at the 13 years of age at the moment, and that's kind of like the best case scenario. There's some kids that are doing 5 hours of fitness a week, right? So consistency, and you can see really good improvements. In particular, it's really important to do it when kids go through a rapid growth spurt, the peak height velocity, right? So when kids are going through their second fastest growth spurt in their lifetime after their birth, from when every child is born up to the age of 1 is the fastest growth spurt for anyone. And then the second fastest is when they're going through the puberty. So that's when a lot of the physical qualities decline. So, and that is a very, very important time to do movements, so the body is getting used to and building awareness to the new height and weight parameters, right? Because when your bones are growing, the muscles are being stretched, so everything feels more stiff. You're tight. You cannot move as well. You cannot lunge and get in the shapes that tennis requires, right? Because it's fairly extreme, when you think about it. Someone coming from school desk and being hunched over and sitting, you have to go to the opposite. You got to be able to reach, and you got to be able to slide, right? So lower body, upper body, so lower back. So I would say my minimum recommendation would be twice a week, and then you can build from that. So I would say from anywhere between an hour to 3 hours a week would be a really good start.
Okay, that's great. And we talk about multi-sport, and we drop this word a lot, but can you please specify, in your opinion, what are the best sports that would complement tennis for U12, for example, like your growing like kid?
I would definitely think something where your hands and your feet are involved, where
Mhm.
you are able to dissociate. So, because my background is basketball, and because I've seen basketball players from my own experience are
Mhm.
able to do many sports,
Mhm.
because we've been able to build the spatial awareness, the ability to dissociate between lower body, upper body, running,
Mhm.
jumping, landing, 2 foot, single foot, raising the hands above, shooting. So tennis being overhead sport, a lot of the injuries are, coming from, shoulder injuries and overuse.
Mhm.
So the footwork patterns are very similar. The endurance aspect, the IQ as well, quick change, quick like adapting to the speed of the game. Because in tennis, you have to make a decision in split second. So I would say sport number one for me personally um, would, and from my own experience and what I've seen,
Mhm.
basketball. And a lot of tennis players love basketball. When you look
Yeah,
around the globe, you're looking
that's
at
it.
Instagram. Everybody,
That's true.
everybody likes to shoot the ball, right? So, and it's, you just need a hoop and that's, and a ball. You don't
Yeah.
need a lot. So I would say that. Um, Another would be soccer would be really good as well.
Mhm.
Um, but there you don't have the hands,
That's
right?
right.
So you're not using your hands in basketball because you have to feel the ball in your fingers in order to shoot. So also that develops dexterity that is really important for net play. So,
Mhm.
anyways, soccer would be good. What else? Hockey, because it's an invasion game, right? So you've got to be able to move into open spaces, open areas. Um, I think swimming also, in a way, that I recommend to many parents, if you can. Obviously, one is a life skill, right? So
Mhm.
it's really important, especially living by a lake, or the biggest lakes in the world, Canada. I
Yeah.
think it's really important. It develops really good shoulder strength, leg strength, breathing, control of your breath, which can help in recovering between the points, when your heart rate's up. So I would say those would be my top four,
What
most
about
likely.
gymnastics?
I mean, yeah, gymnastics as well at a
Mhm.
younger age for sure. I would say anywhere between 6 to 10. Um, just body awareness,
That's right.
ability to, do forwards roll, backwards roll, cartwheels, stuff like that. 100%. I would say that would be my top three for
Mhm.
sure. Gymnastics as well. Yeah. Um,
Nice.
but I would say uh, at least one ball sport, and if you can include like gymnastics and or swimming,
Mhm.
that would also be very beneficial,
Okay.
because the ball is really important. Even if you're baseball as well is not bad because of the
Mhm.
throwing action,
That's
right?
right.
So, and then the pronation, so it's a very like similar movement.
Mhm.
um, but yeah, those would be kind of like my top four, my top five.
All right.
Mm.
That's good. Um, you're working with different level of athletes from top national level to international level to some who's just starting perhaps. um, what do you see in general, maybe you can talk about some skills that you see that are lacking the most, like that you see, like you constantly get like a lot of kids, you see a lot of kids, right? And it's kind of like, what are the skills that typically like you notice, oh, that's underdeveloped, and it's like keep happening again and again, you keep seeing the same
I
pattern,
think,
so to speak.
yeah, I think one big, and maybe you will agree with me, or
Hmm.
from a tennis perspective, is the
Hmm.
hands,
Yeah.
right? Dexterity, anything
Yeah.
to do with hands,
Hmm.
ability to control the ball. So, and especially at younger ages, because kids are not maybe as good with that, and maybe now the things are changing and shifting, because the tennis is evolving, and
Hmm.
every tennis coach understands now, okay, if you want, if I want my group or kids and my athletes to be competitive, you've got to be able to do everything, right? So you got to be able to have good net play, and then to mix it up, so you have all the skills in your tool bag. So The biggest thing for me is dexterity, the hands. You know, so that would be from a tennis player perspective, and that is something that we work quite a bit with. You know, every activity that involves hands. And one really good game that we play is spike ball. Whether
Yes. So good.
it's with a racket or whether you're using your hand, your palm as a tennis racket, and
Hmm.
with different kind of balls. You know, sometimes I use a handball where
Okay.
things change, right? Sometimes I use a foam tennis ball. The
Hmm.
lighter the ball, the more feel you need to have. You know, the harder the ball, the more you can strike. So
That's right. That's so cool.
yeah, so
I like that idea of different balls because it gives you different tactile feeling. You have to adjust,
exactly.
the pressure of your hands. I
Yes,
can. Oh, that's
yes.
awesome.
I
Wow.
would say that is the most important thing. And second would be the ability to change direction properly. So
Hmm.
to have wide base and then to explode off the line, or you know, when you're
Hmm.
changing direction, and that also ties into and it has a strong correlation with, you know, injury occurrence, because things happen when you're planting your foot, when you're landing. Nothing happens in the air when you're pushing off. Most things are happening when you're, you know, you're landing your foot and you're reaccelerating and you're moving in another direction, whether that's moving forward or sideways. I mean, sideways, 70% of the movements on the tennis court's happening sideways, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is number two. So those are the things that we prioritize and work on, I would say, daily.
Okay.
Something with hands, because
The
because
Yeah.
you're holding the racket all the time. There's no
Yeah.
point on a tennis court where you're not doing that. So if you want to improve it, you need to do something most days of the week. Coaches have to come up with some sort of a skill where you're working on dexterity most
Hmm.
days. Is
Okay.
one of the physical qualities under coordination.
Okay. Interesting.
Mhm.
So would the other racket sports solve that? Like if you play, let's say, um, badminton, ping pong,
Yeah,
like is that does
yeah,
that help with that?
for
Like is
sure.
that
Yeah,
okay?
sometimes I use kind of like,
Pickleball, God
yeah,
forbid, like
pickleball, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
okay.
So and you know, definitely I use smaller rackets. Let's say, kids that are starting with, and in fitness we sometimes play um, spike ball with like a really small racket, right?
Mhm.
Because kids at, let's say, the age of 8 to 12, when you're playing a game, for example, like that, because you're quite close to the circle, whether you have the actual spike ball equipment, I don't. I just create a circle with cones and we play that way. So you don't need a lot of equipment,
Mhm.
right? So you need one ball and you need 4 or 5 cones, and off
Mhm.
you go. You can play one on one, you can play 2v2, where you have to play together with your partner, where you have to bump it to your partner and he or she attacks. So we use either hands or we use a small racket if you have. You can use a paddle racket as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, anything.
Wh- When you say change of direction is the second thing,
Mhm.
like the second most underdeveloped skill that you encounter, is that because tennis coaches don't work on it, or is it because of? I mean, I guess it's a combination of both, but just want to hear your perspective. So, is it
Mhm.
because of tennis coaches, or is it because kids' lack of physical education, as in
Skills.
like playing different sports?
Yeah,
Okay.
skills. So let's say if a child plays basketball or soccer as
Mhm.
well, um, then it's more natural, because they have to adapt. If I'm playing defense, I have to quickly adapt. So when I'm planting the foot, usually what happens, and this is one of the reasons that I notice with majority of the kids, when they're changing direction, when they're running fast, they're coming
Mhm.
down, for example, they're running from singles to singles, for example, or doubles to doubles, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times they're not able to absorb. It could be strength, quality, lack of strength,
Mhm.
or it could be skill based. they don't have the skills. They haven't actually specifically worked on something like that, right? So, and you can do it in many ways. You can do it, with single leg hops and jumping, where you're learning how to absorb and then push off. So
Mm-hmm.
usually what kids do is they would have 2 touches before they would change direction,
That's
right?
right.
So they're running fast, they touch once and another touch, and then they change direction and they run the opposite direction. So
Mm-hmm.
my focus when I'm coaching is you plant once, you absorb, and you push off right away. You explode with
That's right.
that one
That's right.
touch, because those 2 touches take longer. So
Of
you're
course.
late for the
Yeah,
next
and then
point.
you lose momentum. You're not as explosive on the way back too.
Exactly. So, and I would say third would be rotation.
Mm-hmm.
Rotational patterns that I implement a lot, whether it's with a band, whether it's with medicine ball throws or basketball or soccer ball. You don't have to have medicine ball. So
Yeah,
that's another one. And rotation is, I would say, the most undertrained movement in all
I
walks of life.
I agree.
So that those, I would say, those three would be really important.
So with kids who do multi sports,
Mhm.
do you find that you just don't need to work on that? Don't need to work on that as much, or like I'm just saying, like, so playing multi sport, playing all these different sports, does that completely kind of you know prevent me from prevent you from teaching that? Does that mean like the kid kind of owns the skill on its own? Like, is that the case, or it just makes your job easier?
It definitely makes my job easier. I
Okay.
would definitely still work on it and would make
Hmm.
progressions, right?
Okay.
For example, someone that, plays baseball or any other throwing sport, right? So, besides tennis, I look at the kid, yeah, he's naturally a good thrower, but I could also create situations where I'm moving him around and where he has to throw and jump at the same time,
Hmm.
right? So you can definitely progress those things. And that just means that, yeah, it makes your life easier, right? So you can challenge the kid more, right? So
Hmm.
as soon as he or she gets comfortable, you would try to create an environment where you would add more constraints, whether it's time, whether it's pressure, whether it's, a different kind of progression where it's harder. So, but definitely I would work on it for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it makes sense. I just wanted really to reiterate that point, that it's important that if you're a parent and if you're listening to this, that you're really spending that extra time that your child has for fitness. They're spending that time to do multi-sport, like all the sports that we just brought up,
Mhm.
because in the end, it saves time. In the end, it makes your child better as a tennis player. So it's a hard concept to understand, I guess, for somebody outside of sports, that you need to invest in something else in order to get better in tennis.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like, well, if I need to get good at math, I just do math. I don't need to do history to get better
Mhm.
at math, right? So it's kind of like, it's a little different, where, okay, like, you want to get better in tennis, you got to do fitness. Then later, like, okay, you have to make sure you have good nutrition, you have to make sure you have like good sleep, you have to make sure you're recovering properly, and all those things. So, and obviously, like, parents learn as the more time they spend.
Mhm.
But it's very, very important that the child, again, is not overtrained. Yes, you can get better faster if you just do tennis, but then it catches up fast.
Mhm.
Like, you just see, like, I've seen so many times the kid they're like, okay, a U12, some of them are even really good, but I see they don't have like proper coordination. I see they don't have proper body awareness. Like, they're not using their wrist. They don't know how to use their wrist.
Mhm.
And then it catches up to them when they're U14, U16,
Yes.
and then the kid is kind of disappears from the scene.
Yeah, and then to add something, there's also difference between boys and girls.
Hmm.
So boys usually will be better at these skills, throwing, catching, um, just across the board for whatever reason. They just are, because they will most likely play catch with their friends. They most likely will go and shoot hoops with their friends. Girls
Mhm.
just naturally don't do that unless a girl is involved in basketball program, right? So also boys watch more sports. They can envision and imagine. If a tennis player is watching, Steph Curry or even tennis, ATP, WTA, um, there are definitely exceptions, but just talking to boys, they just know the sport better. They follow it more, right? So I don't know why, but that's just the way it is. And so boys are better with the soft skills, with the catching, throwing, but
Mhm.
girls pre-puberty are better at they're faster, they're running
Mhm.
faster, they're physically a little bit more developed because they're developing a little bit faster, right?
Mhm.
So 1 to 2 years earlier than boys. If you're looking at the numbers, girls would go through their puberty between 11 to 13, boys 12 to 14, and some even later, right? So
Mhm.
and you can also measure that through, you can take some basic measurements like weight, height, seated height, and there's a formula where you can predict. The formula predicts when the child is going to go through their puberty
Yeah.
and through their fast growth spurt. And also, then you can adjust their training. So, pre puberty, you would focus more on plyometrics and speed with most kids. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't work on strength as well, and endurance, but less comparatively. But then you would also start adding more strength based exercises post puberty, which is really important. Having said that, you were also working on your plyometrics and speed as well. So you basically work on all physical qualities. It just depends on where the child is in within their development, right? And then percentage wise, okay, I'm focusing more on this, a bit less on that. But you basically trying to work on all physical qualities
Yeah.
through their development stages. It's just one you do more, the other one you do less.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You brought up formula that calculates, when the kid is going to hit their puberty, and
Mm-hmm.
like, and there's some formulas that also can predict the height, like potentially like of an athlete. I have a funny story. That's why I'm laughing. When I started working for Tennis Canada, we had a coach who joined our training center, and he was explaining that, like, yeah, I can predict how tall this kid is going to be. I was like, there is no way you can predict the height.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, no, I can calculate. I'm like, no way. Okay, let's do it right now. If that height happens, like if that kid is 6 feet whatever, four, like 6 feet to one, like I'm gonna buy you dinner. Like there's no way. So we wrote it down. We recorded a video of him like saying, this kid, it's still in my phone. So like this kid is gonna be this tall. And let me tell you what, like 2 years, no, 3 years later or 4 years later, I realized that I'm losing that bet. Like it was so accurate. I was like blown away that you can be so
Mm-hmm.
so accurate with that stuff. Sorry, it's completely like off topic, but I just remember that if that coach is still watching, for any reason, like contact me because I owe you I owe you dinner. That's
Mm-hmm.
just hilarious. We talked about skills that we really want to emphasize, that you see like the skills that are lacking in athletes development. What are the skills that are we're talking U12, for example, like what are the skills that are absolutely like you don't need that when you're U12? Because again, if you're a coach, if you're a parent, maybe you're doing something that is completely not relevant right now. the reason
Yeah.
i'm the reason I'm asking, because I have few examples. One of the parent, for example, and I don't know if he's right or wrong. That's where I want your expertise on this. I have a parent of a 6-year-old who's making them, like, who's having them do like simple things like push-ups or squatting, that kind of stuff. Is that too early for that? Is that like ahead of the kind of what needs to be done? For example, you also, I know that you say that you don't need long distance running for when you're U12, for example. Because again, a lot of parents, a lot of coaches, hey, you gotta run, you gotta build that endurance. But from what I heard from someone that you know goes to the course that you teach at the Club Pro
Mhm.
2, that coach mentioned that that's what you said. Am I right here? Like that, if you're U12, you're not developing as much endurance, so it's not really.
So
I
yeah, so the cardiovascular system,
That's
like
right.
from physiological standpoint, is still developing. So,
Mhm.
and you you do need to develop the endurance, but more at the end of the onset of puberty.
Mhm.
You know, so having said that, under 12s, I would still build endurance, but through small sided games.
Okay.
You need it because let's say what would you say is an average length of the match for under 12s player on average?
Watch 1 hour.
Okay, so he or she needs to be able to move for that period of time, right? So there is definitely elements of endurance. You have to, whether it's aerobic capacity or more specific like speed endurance, because you've got to be able to repeat, repetitively do sprints.
Yeah.
Whether
Yeah.
it's forward, back, side to side. So my approach is games based approach
Yeah.
to endurance. That's what I'm choosing. I don't like to run laps, right?
Yeah. So
So
that's kind of was my question, because even when you're playing games, you're doing more somewhat similar to tennis, where you're like doing
yeah,
a burst of, like, so it's like anaerobic, like energy system pretty
yeah.
much. So it's not like laps where it's like
Hmm.
that. So
Hmm.
so that's why I wanted to clarify, like, if we have like a U10 player, running laps is no good. Is
I
it
mean,
gonna help, or
you
is
you
it?
can. I don't think it's going to. For me, the most important thing is we need to remember that they're still kids.
Mhm.
They like to have fun. Someone with, and it also depends on the child. Someone that likes to chase a ball will have far better intent than when you're getting to run laps. And
Mhm.
let's say when the coach is not watching, the kid's walking a lot of times. They're
That's
not
right.
running, right?
That's true.
It's just not enjoyable. Like it's boring. Some kids love running and it's their thing. And if they like running, yes, put them in track and field or cross country, right? So that's what I used to do as well. I used to run 800, 1500, and 3000 without doing any track training. I just ran it during school competition, and then the Latvian championships and the regional championships. I always represented my school because I um, just had genetically good endurance. I was able
Mhm.
to do it for whatever reason, you know. Um, and so I find that the fun aspect is really important, and through that you're making him adapt to ever changing environment. What tennis is,
Yeah.
tennis is not running laps. So
Mhm.
why do it if you could do something else? So that would be my approach. I definitely like the small sided games, and that's something that I see that is very effective. I would say far more effective than running laps, because let's say if I'm playing, for example, as a game like a passing game where you have 3 or 4 players that are competing against each other, and they have to accumulate certain amount of passes, whether it's overhead, whether it's bounce pass, chest
Mhm.
pass, whatever, roll the ball. So you have to accumulate 15, 20 points or passes, then your team gets a point, and etc. etc. A game like this, you
Mhm.
can make it very intense by shrinking the space where they have to change a lot of direction. It's very tiring. Or you can make it bigger where you have the opportunity to maybe walk and run slowly because you have more space. It's actually easier in a bigger space, and it's much harder in a smaller space. So you can actually changing that environment and space. You can work on different physical qualities, whether it's more anaerobic or more aerobic. So and then again, the adaptability, and then the hand skill aspect as well. So you're developing multiple skills at the same time, right? Because your time as a tennis coach on a tennis court is limited. So
that's perfect.
I would maybe sometimes recommend, okay, if someone's late, okay, skipping rope, you need to warm up 2-3 laps. That's it.
Okay.
I'm not doing any more running. It's just not effective.
Okay.
So
just so you're looking at it strictly from like time management perspective as well.
Time,
like what can I do in like 20 minutes?
Yeah, and efficiency. Effectiveness.
Exactly.
So the kid can, if he wants to run on your own time when you're not there at tennis. Other than that, no.
Makes sense. What about like push-ups and all that, all those things? Like at what age, like, is it a good idea to start? Because some parents want to get a head start, or just want to have like a physically developed child.
Yeah.
So
that's a really good question about push-ups. And sometimes I've been in situations where kids would come from fitness or from tennis both, and then they cannot lift their arms. You're like, oh man, we did 100 push-ups. How often have you seen an under 12 being able to do a proper push-up without their hips sagging? Not many. So for me, if I'm giving them teaching them how to do push-ups, I would start with negative push-ups, meaning you start on the top and you slowly learn to lower your body down. Get on your knees, reset, go back up. So teaching them from the other way around, because a lot of kids just don't have the core strength and control. Push-up is not just a product of upper body strength, but it's the combination of upper body and core, because you have to be able to lift your hips and shoulders at the same time. And a lot of times the shoulders are coming up first, hips are following. So you're teaching the wrong thing. And you're going to have to reteach that over and over and over and over. Right. So you're spending more time. So it's not efficient. What I do is I give them a lot of rotational movement patterns with pressing and pulling. Single arm is the king or the queen for an overhead sport like tennis, because the dominant arm is so much. You can see, for example, you look at Rafa Nadal, the left side is just so much bigger than the right side. So I rarely do 2-arm exercises. Sometimes I will do push-ups just to test their core strength and see when I can start overloading their spine. But push-ups is probably not very used exercise in my exercise selection or vocabulary for kids, especially under 12. A, because they don't know how to do it. They don't have the core strength and stability yet to do it. And B, you're pushing with both hands, so your a dominant hand is going to dominate and create maybe even more asymmetry. So I do flies with bands and then pushing with one arm, or whether you use dumbbells or bands to push. Single arm, single leg exercises. Squats are great. I would say lunges are better, because the right side has to do the same amount of work as the left side.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then a lot of times you see like the hips shifting, and that can create irritation in the lower back also because of the extension, and serving. So I would say single arm and single leg is the way to do it.
Okay. Just again, it proves just one more time that it's important that you focus on technique.
Yeah.
And if you can do one bad push-up, it will only lead to 10 bad push-ups. Yeah. But if you learn the right way, it will increase doing 10, 15, 20 the right way.
Yeah.
Helps with the injury prevention.
100%. If anything, let's say, sorry for interrupting, but another thing that, someone, one of my colleagues would ask me, okay, what do we do if I want to, like punish the kids? Or let's say a losing team, what do they do, right? Not as a punishment. I say,
Yeah.
work on their back, do rows, give them side plank and give them rows. Because you're developing your on any single forehand or backhand shots, the power is coming from the back. You load, and this is just a follow through, right? So it doesn't come that much from the shoulder stability has to be there and deceleration when you're finishing your shot and pronating, but everything comes from your back. So train your back, and that will also help with the posture. So all kinds of rear flies, side plank, rows, or just regular rows with bands. That is basically my go-to. I do 3 or 2 pulling movements for one pushing movement that I do with tennis players. That is generally the ratio, and this is something that we also discussed in one of the seminars put up by Tennis Canada, where Medvedev's fitness coach was also presenting at the same seminar that was last year, and he said the same thing. With pros as well that he works with Medvedev, he does 2 or 3 pulling movements comparing to 1 pushing movement. So if he would do dumbbell press, he would do 2 or 3 pulling movements, because most of the power comes from the muscles that you can't see in the mirror.
That makes sense. How do you work on posture? What are the things maybe that every kid can do on their own? Kind of like a 1 minute a day fix, like to improve their posture, how to find a good posture. Maybe you can just talk about, because you brought up posture, and that's something I see in kids, even me, myself, like right now, I'm finding myself like a little bit, so like as a kid who's like that, like how do you fix that? What can a kid do?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One is having a good mobility around your scapula and your thoracic spine. That is number one, where what you can do is you can do different movements with, you start with always with mobility. So you can do, movements like, for example, pulling your shoulder blades back and forth, right? So same thing up. You can do some wall glides with your hands, being in a good posture. And also the other one would be, some low level strength, whether you do, wall slides as you're standing at the wall. Those would be really good warm-up exercises, or you do it on the ground when you're laying on the ground. So where the gravity is, helping you a little bit. So I would get a lot of times do it on the ground, to slide my hands up and down as I'm laying on my back with my knees bent and feet flat. So I would say those few things are really important, and also like having a really good balance. So doing more pulling, less pushing, because like they're just like this, right? So and then stretching as well. So stretching your pecs. So all kinds of movements, right? So this would be one. You can stand in, in the middle of the door kind of frame, stretch one side, one arm at a time. So let's say threefold, mobility first, some activation and low level strengthening, and some stretching at the same time. That's another thing. And a big part, I believe, is hydration, because when you're dehydrated, the muscles are like really like they tend to tense up a little more. It's like you're cooking a chicken. When you overcook it, it's really dry. When it's the right kind of amount of water in the chicken, then it's a lot softer. So hydration is big, 100%. So when your body's hydrated, your muscles are also more elastic, and they don't lose the elasticity, right?
That's very interesting. I've never heard anyone talking about posture and hydration in the same kind of context. That's wow.
And also that's like strength and power as well, right? So it's really important to have, when your muscles are elastic enough, they're able to contract and relax at the same time, because they don't not only need to contract but also need to relax. So the muscle doesn't stay in a contracted phase all the time.
That's
It's
right.
like,
That makes sense.
contracting, relaxing, contracting, relaxing. So,
Mhm.
and also that requires, the influence of, water too. So yeah, where the
All right.
energy is created in the cells. So
Okay.
mhm.
Kristaps, we talked a lot about today, um, about so many things. I want you, because we're approaching the end of our podcast, I want you
Mhm.
to maybe finish with some advice for parents whose child plays tennis. So, anything that you want to kind of finish on?
Yeah, definitely find a coach that does care about your child. Number one, that doesn't just work with your child during training, but that also attends their um, matches outside of the club, right? So I think care is the biggest thing. Someone that has passion for the sport, right? Um, and someone that continuously you know does continuous education and wants to grow and learn, right? So I think for me, those are kind of big takeaways, because people really feel quickly if a coach cares or he
Yeah,
doesn't, right? So
100%.
you can fake it for a week or two or a month, but then that will come out. And someone, let's say for example, a really good example was COVID time. You know, seeing how many coaches were getting out and getting their kids out and finding times and ways to still keep them engaged and
That's
active,
right.
and including yourself, right? So
That's right.
following your Instagram and videos, what you did with your groups and this and that. So encourage kids to get out and then still stay active and work on things regardless of the space that you have, the equipment that you have, or the weather
That's right.
patterns. So that's, I think those are kind of really important things. um, yeah, so care, you know um, continuous development, and what was the third thing that I mentioned? um, yeah,
Attending matches.
yeah, exactly. So outside as well. So from what I've seen, and then also that's what I'm trying to do as well with my athletes as best as
Mhm.
I can. So yeah, and then when you care about them, they're going to be willing to come back, and
Yeah, for
you're
sure.
making the, and also you're making decisions fun, and so, and they're engaged. So those would be kind of my most important top three things. I mean, there's obviously more to it, but yeah.
There is this famous saying that the kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Hmm.
Right. So that's kind of what it's about.
Yeah.
Kristaps, thank you so much for spending your time and talking to us about all of those things. They were great. I had a blast talking to you, and
Thank you.
all the best to you.
Thank you so much for having me, and all the best to you, Bogdan.
Thank you, Kristaps.
Yeah, cheers.